The National Association of Realtors just released the predicted sales data for 2026, and the results may shock you.
Yeah, I don't know about this. 14%. I'm having a tough time with this one.
The 14% increase in home sales?
Yeah, next year. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me like the economy's going into a rough time next year. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I just think that if you look at their data and we can kind of pick it apart, so I guess if you don't think it's going to go up, do you think the market's crashing?
Well, I don't think it's crashing, but that's very different than up 14%. Mm-hmm. So you know what I mean? Well, first of all, there's so many things that have to go right? Like, if I dug into this just like you did, but the one thing is the unemployment rate at the end of next year is supposed to go up another 0.03, so from 4.2 to 4.5, and there's actually a couple that say that it could be up to 4.8. So of course, I ChatGPT'd how many people is that? And there's 170 million people in the workforce, so it's 500,000 people that could be more unemployed by the end of next year. So I don't know. It seems to me like things are kind of unraveling a little bit next year. I just don't see the interest rates coming down at the point because the Fed is the counterbalance to the rate cut is going to be that unemployment rate.
So can we first go over the data? So Jerry, Can you pull the NAR data for us? Okay. So, well, essentially what they're saying is they're seeing a 14% increase in home prices and a 4% rise in prices in 2026. And I actually believe that I agree with you on the 14% increase in home sales. I do think there will be an increase in home sales. We've already seen an increase in home sales on the second half of this year versus the first half of this year.
But what's that from? Let's break that down because I don't want to disagree until I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So the interest rates are down.
So you think interest rates are going to continue to go down in 26, and that's why we're going to have more home sales?
Yes, and I don't believe, I'm with you, I don't believe interest rates are going to plummet, but I do believe interest rates are going to go down, and the average interest rate this year was 6.7%. Yeah. The average interest rate next year, I think, will be closer to 6, because right now interest rates are at 6.2, and so we've already seen an increase in home sales just based on that half a point. And then I think we continue to see that,
I
significantly lower.
I actually do agree with that. I think we're going to have a quarter point this next month. There's like a 78% probability at this point. But if you dig into the data, obviously the lockdown kind of threw that sideways. And there's a couple, like ADP has a report out that talks about what's really going on with employment. I think that's very interesting because it's not positive. And so it'll be very interesting to see, where unemployment lands into next year. And the reason I keep bringing that up is because that will be the hedge for future rate cuts.
But I do think that this is important. So right now, your first-time home buyers only make up 20% of the market. Everybody else, and it's normally 40%. And most buyers right now are boomers. And boomers don't rely on jobs for buying properties. They rely on, their investments. And I think that as we go into 26, is if they roll out this 50-year mortgage and if they roll out lower rates and if Trump does, some programs to try to get rates down even more, I do think you're going to see boomers continue to buy, and they're most of the market that's buying right now.
What are the people watching think? I'd be interested in that too. Like I'd love to hear your feedback on this because sometimes, like in my world, over the years of reading this data, I always look at the source, right? Like in other words, when I get a broker package from from somebody who's selling something, it always has the bow around it. It always looks so positive and so optimistic. And you guys know, right? So when the National Association of Realtors puts out a report, of course it's going to be rosy, right? Or just flat. But it's not very often that somebody's going to say that's going to be negative. So I always kind of consider that, right? Like the bias of the organization. However, I'd love to be challenged on this. It just, I think when I read the report, I didn't see anything meaningful inside of it that popped. And when I there you go, Jerry. There you go. There's the report. So the groundwork is can you go down just a little bit, Jerry, the other way where you just were? Thank you. All right, already forming is what they're saying. Mortgage applications are trending higher. Now, I do think we could see a very interesting first quarter, second quarter, right? And we always kind of do, like pent up. People pull their stuff off the market at the end of the year, holiday time. We know that. And then they relist it in January. So I think you're going to have this surge of product, and therefore, hopefully, that's good for the buyer, right? Mm-hmm. More product to choose from. That's good for the buyer. To that point, that could be. So maybe people are sitting there and saying, we've got this little window where there's going to be a tremendous amount of inventory hitting in mid-26 and early to mid-26. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I just think that the market is already picking up. I think that you're going to continue to see that into 26. The only thing that could derail that is massive unemployment. And I don't know if we'll have massive unemployment. I mean,
No, massive is a weird number, if it is one at all. I don't know. Massive is, 500,000 people is significant, I think. To go from 4.2 to 4.5, which is almost everybody says it's 4.2 to 4.5. I think the Federal Reserve of Philly, I think it was, said it might be 4.8. I might be misquoted there. But there is a couple that say it's going to be worse and be upwards of the high 4.8. But, okay, so the 3%, though, I think people lose track of what that when they see these small percentages, it goes from 4.2 to 4.3 to 4.4 to 4.5. That's 500,000 people. That's significant. Now, to your point, who are they? What jobs are they? And I think a lot of times we assume that those are entry level, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are.
Yeah, I think right now a lot of the AI jobs that are getting taken over are entry level for the most part.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, but it's creeping up. Like mm-hmm. I know. Let me ask you this: do you think associate lawyers are entry level, like first 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you do? Okay. So, because that's where it's creeping. It's creeping into those, call it the people that have been in the job just a short period of time that are still considered at one time white collar,
mm-hmm.
right? CPAs, attorneys.
But I also think that those entry-level people, because of their student debt, because I have friends that were attorneys, they're not in a good financial position to buy a house in those first few years anyways.
Depending, yeah, obviously, if they ran up a bunch of student debt, then you would be correct there. But
mm-hmm.
If they didn't, and they just get cut, then, but to your point, I do agree it's already coming after the customer service jobs. It's coming after the coder jobs. It's coming after the graphics. It's coming after a lot of social media stuff that people had. And we, I think I might have mentioned this before. I saw one last week where there's an AI chef. Listen to this. Like one of the top restaurants in Dubai has an AI chef. So I sent it to my friend who's a chef, Jason, over at the Global Ambassador. He's like, this is crazy. And then he dug into it. So we don't quite know where AI is going to stop, but that is definitely not a customer service type, answering the phone type position.
But you do have to look at the data and what's happening on the ground. Like April through July, at least in the Phoenix market of last year, there was 3% concessions on almost every deal. Everything was selling for under, the cost of the list. Now, sellers are not doing concessions and they're only dropping their price slightly on most deals. And so
what does that mean? Does that mean that it's a buyer's market? Does it mean it's a seller's market?
It's still a buyer's market, but it's less of a buyer's market than it was back in April. Like I'm working with a lot of first-time home buyers, and I've told all of them, this spring, you should buy. This is a great time. We can get 3% concessions. We can get a discount off the sales price. And now all of them are kicking themselves because now you can get a slight discount on the sales price, but there's no concessions in this market.
Well, you just sold $1 million house over the weekend, so what do I know?
Yeah.
Right? Like in 24 hours or something, right? Yeah. So, and it wasn't even listed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
You had a buyer that said, "I want to live in this building," but are those one-offs then? That's the question, or is it migration? Are people moving here? Like, is it like some areas are shrinking, some areas are growing?
Yeah, and every area is different. But, the interest rates, I mean, I know to a half a point to a lot of people does not make a big difference, but it's more the factor that interest rates are heading downwards. And I think buyers are sensing no matter how long it takes, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, I need to buy now and then I can refinance later versus interest rates going up every time and them thinking they're going to be stuck at this rate for longer.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. There's a lot of harping on interest rates. I get that. One of the bigger reasons to focus on that is the mass of people that have trapped equity and they want to move, right? That's the biggest reason to talk about it. The second reason is the people who are trying to just get that best monthly payment that they can. And that is not the baby boomers. And it's not a lot of millennials either, right? So, however, I think, in our last live, we talked about what can they rely on right now? Because crypto's kind of squirrely. Gold is flat and kind of pulled back a little bit. Silver's on a run right now. Real estate is, especially commercials, flat, and has been for a couple of years now. Rent growth is kind of flat. A lot of individual landlords are in a little bit of trouble right now.
Yeah,
where they're not cash flowing like they were. So the question is that time? Usually, when all that stuff's going well, there's more people to buy houses. Right, and that's kind of my point. And then you have that. So it's like the faucet got turned off a little bit in this Q4, let's call it, right now, where people are a little they're concerned about things like the stock market and obviously crypto and some of the other things, and so they're just kind of neutral. Yet a lot of them are sitting on all this trapped equity, and they're not going to unlock it unless rates go down a lot. Because don't forget, there's still, I can't remember the number. It's a pretty high percentage of people own things all cash, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a huge percentage in the 60s where people are locked at 4% and under. Okay, so we're at 6.5. The average is 4. That is not 26. We're not going to get anywhere close to that, because if somebody makes a lateral move, their payment goes up, $500, $1,000 a month. So they're not going to do that.
The difference, though, is if they do come out with the 50-year mortgage and those rates are lower because they're adjustable, right? Every 5 years or however they end up doing it, but that's kind of what Canada does. Then, you could have a much closer payment to what they're paying. Now, you could look at it and say, is that smart? Because, they're only locking it in for 5 years. I don't know, but I think most people live, day to day, month to month.
You brought up a really good point that I'm glad you just rolled that right into me perfectly. There's a really interesting article came out. So every one of my cycles that I've experienced, and I'm going back to, a long time ago, including 2008, the great financial crisis, and all of them largely has a lot to do with Canada. So the Canadians oftentimes have homes in the U.S. and there's a Canadian effect. In fact, as you guys know, in 2008, I went up there with a group, and we raised a bunch of money from their retirement plans, which was called, I think it's called the Retirement Savings Plan, or RRSP, I believe, and we bought a bunch of apartments in Texas. And why am I bringing all this up? Because right now Canada's kind of pissed off at us, and so we were in the middle of trying to do a deal with some Canadian folks about 6 months ago when Trump called them the 51st state, I think it was, and there's all kinds of stuff going on between the U.S. and Canada. There's serious tension right now about commerce and tariffs and all that stuff, and I only bring that up because foreign investment is a big piece of recovery and momentum, and I think that is something right now that's a bit on the shelf right now. I think it was in BizNow, BISNOW. If you take a look, there's an article about this, and I do think, albeit a small piece, it is a piece, and this is why I just don't think that the NAR is. I think 14% is just ridiculous. It blows my mind. I didn't find anywhere where anybody said it was double digit.
But I still think what's interesting, and I don't disagree with you that 14% is too high, but I do believe that the housing market will be busier next year than it was this year. This year it was really frozen, and rates have come down almost a point.
Yeah.
Or at their highest. And I also think that that's very controversial and to a lot of people's feeling that the market's going to go down and crash next year. And in fact, I was working with a pretty big real estate agent, a real estate investor last week, and she said, I think spring was the slowest point for the market in general, in Texas where she's at and also in Arizona. And I would agree with her. I don't know if we'll see that kind of slowdown again in 26.
So what happened then?
In 25?
Yeah, in the spring.
I think everyone was just really stagnant. They didn't know what to do. They weren't sure what rates were going to do. They didn't know how long it was going to take for rates to go down. And right when they started to drop the rates is when the market picked up. Even though it was a quarter of a point, it was just a mindset thing for people. Like, mindset's a big part of a buying decision. And just the mindset of, if I get in now, I can always refinance because they are bringing rates down. Even if it's 2 or 3 years from now, they're bringing rates down. Where before you would buy and rates kept going up, and that was really defeating.
The one thing that I have to agree with is I think that sellers, I think 25, a lot of sellers were still looking in the rearview mirror, right? Like this is how the market is. And now they're sitting on properties, and so days on market's more. Like, it's a great example of the one that you just did, where it was almost $100,000 reduction.
It was, but I will tell you the seller's pushback to that was next year is going to be a busier market. So, because we wanted it for less, right? But he was like, next year is going to be a busier market once January hits.
We should have him on the channel then.
Yeah,
he must know something.
But I'm not even saying he's right. But what I'm saying is also sellers have a different mindset too next year. So that'll be interesting as well, where people are hearing that the market is busier because it is, and they're waiting till after the holidays. And then when they go list, they're going to be expecting, they're not going, I feel like in April, where everyone had stuff listed and then it was sitting and the market was really stagnant. The reason people were getting those 3% concessions is because two things. One, things were just sitting. But two, and this is a big one, is home buyers thought it was easy to sell their house when they listed it in April. So they had already bought another house. So a lot of the showings were on vacant units. Now, most of the showings are on occupied units because now contingent offers are being accepted, and now people are waiting to buy a home before they, to sell their home before they buy. Where before, people got stuck in this weird spot where homes were selling. So we'll just buy one and then list our house, which isn't really traditional, before 2020. And then you are more desperate when you have a vacant house and a new house. You know
what I call that? Normal.
Yeah.
That's all that is. Well, I mean, like if you're buying a home without selling your other home, the market is in good shape for a seller.
Yeah.
Right? Like, most people don't do that. What's normal traditionally is you list your house and then you deal with the, showing it while you're out looking at the same time, right? And you're trying to time the closing. That's normal. And so maybe we're heading back to, what's normal, right? I do think the sellers are starting to realize it takes a while for them to snap out of their own delusion that, the market's a little bit different now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is different. And I think most sellers have wrapped their head around that, especially if, they know people that are listed or they followed the market at all before they listed. But they're also not giving their properties away because they also don't have to. Most of them are still living there. Most of them are fine living there, and it's more of they want to get a price that they can go out and buy something else.
Yeah. There's no question there's some pent-up demand there. The question is, why are they moving, right? And obviously, if they're relocating, it's a non-issue. They're going to do it anyway. But or maybe they just need that money. That's another one. Like, sometimes you can trade out a 4% loan for a 6% loan because you got some walking around money. Especially if you need it, and that could be another thing that's happening.
And Ebatoy said from YouTube said the Fed will be completely different come May 15th. And I do agree. I don't completely might be a strong word, but it will be different than it is right now.
And what he's saying there is that we're going to have a new Fed chair in May of next year. But, you know, you guys know there's going to be a big spotlight on this person, right? Because they're gonna not want people to think that they're supposed to that they're in Trump's pocket, but you know that he's picking them. Well, he picked Powell.
He did. He picked Powell.
Well, let's don't forget.
Yep.
He picked Powell.
He did pick Powell. So, it'll be interesting because you have a new Fed chair, but then you also, if they do roll out this 50-year mortgage, I know everyone likes to say it's terrible and no one's going to do it, and whatever.
Doesn't matter what people think. Are they going to do it or not? And you know, what do you think? What's the probability?
Yeah, because the rates are going to most likely, without having a definitive answer, it's going to be a reset of every 5 years, and it's going to be a lower rate.
There's going to be a lot of. That's going to be a monumental move, right? It has to move all the way through the system. I don't know if it's going to happen.
What do you mean
year.
move all the way through the system?
Well, you can't just do a 50-year mortgage, right?
No, you can. That's what makes it easy because you can. It doesn't need any approval from Congress or anything. The Fannie and Freddie just have to decide they want to do it, basically.
Right. Well,
so but it's a better deal for them than a 30-year fixed. Like if it resets every 5 years, it's a better deal for the banks.
Well, I don't know. If it was here, then I would. It's tangible, something to talk about. But right now, we're just hypotheticals for next year. But
we'll see.
Let's see. It could be more hype, or maybe not.
Yeah, I think they're going to do it. But let's take a break now and hear a word from our paid sponsor, Monetary Metals.
Gold is near all-time highs, but appreciation isn't the only way to benefit. Monetary Metals, you could potentially earn a yield on your gold, paid in physical gold, without selling it. Here's how it works. When you lease your gold through their platform, pre-qualified companies pay to use it under strict guidelines, like renting out real estate, but with gold. Instead of paying to store your metal, you may earn up to 4% annually in gold. You stay in control and you can choose which leases to participate in. Monetary Metals handles the due diligence, lease terms, and all the administration. Thousands of investors use this approach to grow their gold, not just sit on it. Visit monetary-metals.com/Ken to learn more. Leasing gold involves risk and returns are not guaranteed. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. Please review all risk disclosures at monetary-metals.com. Visit monetary-metals.com/Ken to learn more.
So part of the reason that I'm not sure, I mean, the job market definitely is going to affect real estate sales next year, but it might not be as much as it would normally be because you have to look at how divided our economy is right now on the have and the have-nots. It's worse than it's ever been.
Yes, I would agree with that, right? So let's break that down.
So the haves are people that already own a house and they've already built up this equity through the years. It's basically people that have bought probably in 2021 or before, generally. And a lot of these people are, repeat buyers. A lot of them are baby boomers and they're already leveraging their home equity.
Yeah. There's I mean, obviously, I think we live in a serious bubble where we are in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley for sure, because there's all cash deals, not even financed, all over the place. Like it just blows your mind. But I always have to shake my head and go, okay, this is not normal. What is normal? And the average sale price last year, I looked it up before the live today, was $534,000.
Is the what?
The average. That was the average so far this year, $534,000. So I think that's a more realistic, and they were financed, right? Which means you got to have 100 and a quarter down ish, right? $100,000, let's say at least, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I even look at my brother because he's in Ohio, right? And Ohio is a more normal market, I would say. And you used to be able to get an entry-level home for like $125, right around there. Now an entry-level home is $250, $275.
That's still cheap.
It's cheap, but it's not for your average person. So my brother now wants to move to a nicer home. Let's call it $450, $500. Now, if a first-time buyer, he'd have to be starting from zero. But since he's not, he has $250,000 in equity to go put towards something to kind of upgrade his house. And when I say upgrade his house, like their starter home was good for like 1 or 2 kids, right? But this next home can be good for 3 or 4 kids, right? You have more room, a nicer neighborhood. So my point is like my brother's already in the game. So he already has a $250,000 bump ahead of somebody that hasn't gotten to the game at all.
That's a fair point. So so that's what you mean by have. So
Yep.
so somebody who isn't in a hard asset somewhere, like perhaps a renter. By the way, not all renters are broke for sure. A lot of them have a fair amount of money. We have senior projects where people have a lot of money, and they just choose to rent instead. But there is a big percentage of people that are in that, call it the have-nots, I suppose, right? So you say that the haves are the people that have equity in their homes. What if they don't have a job?
Well,
what if they have equity in their home, but they don't have a job? They're not going to get financed, right?
Right, but they already have a home.
Yeah,
so they're
They'll
okay.
just
Like
stay put.
for instance, for people that already have a very low mortgage, because I know a bunch of people that do, they need to make a lot less money. So say they have a job where they're currently making, $120,000 a year, they'd be tight, but they'd probably still be fine if they got a job making 60, because their housing payment is so low. Like most people's expense right now is their rent or their high mortgage payment on their mortgage.
Yeah. I guess if you're going to finance something, you got to be kind of buttoned up. I know a lot of people that had really good, like physicians even, that are just trading crypto, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's just pick on them for a minute. And by the way, I'm not picking on physicians, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people that made a lot of money in these kind of side things, right? Call it not their primary. They're not. They don't have a W-2. They don't have a paycheck coming in. It's not consistent. They're subject to the whims of the ups and downs of whatever they're trading. Those folks, I don't think, are they in your haves or are they in your have-nots? Because for me, they're in the have-nots. Even though they have home equity, it's going to be really, really hard for them to make a move. Because of
I think they're in the haves because they're making a bunch of money from crypto, and it's crypto. I mean, it just went down, but it's continuing to go back up.
I guess if they cashed out and paid all cash, then because otherwise they're not financeable, right? Like how do you finance?
Well, I don't want to get into it, but there's tons of crypto programs where you can literally buy your house in crypto without paying any tax. It's a trade. And so there's companies that are doing that now. But I think that's fully getting into something that we're not experts on.
Yeah, I just know, like, when you, like, of all people, like, what you're crushing it, right? You're doing all this stuff, and you were trying to buy a rental, and the guy's like, you need to go get a job. So you have a paycheck for 3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah, when I first started.
The system is, the system requires you to have a W-2. It's bizarre unless you're paying all cash, right?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is for the have-nots are the people that are first-time home buyers, because they are facing really hard challenges getting into the market. And I was actually just telling Ken last night that I've tried to work with 4 first-time home buyers all last year, and none of them have yet to buy a house.
Why is that?
2 things. One, it's a big decision, and the payment is so high, it's hard to justify versus their rent, right? They might be renting for $1,800. Their payment might be, after tax and insurance, $3,800, so it's a big jump. So that's one. And then 2 is that it's just such a big, like a lot of them, because there's PMI, because a lot of them don't have a 20% down payment. Because if you're buying a home that's $600,000, that's going to be $120,000 that you need to put down to not have mortgage insurance. And so all of those little things really up your payment. And I think they're just getting too squeezed to be able to enter the market without some kind of help from parents or somebody.
Well, as you know, I was on that Graham Stephan show, the iced coffee hour with Jack and him, and he brought up, which I already knew, that the median home buyer is 40.
Yep.
Okay, so that should be alarming, but that just goes back to the affordability problem. So it's kind of where you were talking about with haves and have-nots, right? So I would say, without. I guess we got to kind of you can put an age around this a little bit, right? Like if you're over 35, you're probably in pretty good shape.
No, I mean, I
You
wouldn't
don't
say
think?
that.
'Cause
No,
if
I
they
mean, I think a
rented-
lot of people that don't own homes that are over 35. I mean, I do agree with you if you were comparing, how many percentage wise, right? But I think you're almost over 45, 50 to be
Okay.
doing really well.
Okay, so then let's just. There was a method to my madness of making you commit to that. So now what you're saying is the NAR then, it really is focused on those people that are in the 40s or higher, right?
Yep.
So that's really what they expect. So they're going to unlock equity, or they're going to make some moves next year for some reason, which I still don't know. And to your point, if they are part of the haves, they don't have to really worry on interest. They're not as interest rate sensitive.
Right, because they're buying a lot of this in cash.
Right.
They are. And interest rates, though, are going down. I mean, 6 is not horrible. It's not 5, but it's not 7.
Yeah, that is the projection. I looked at a number of now, obviously, most of these are real estate company projections, right? And every single time at the end of the year, if you look at 2026 projections, it's almost all favorable or neutral, right? It's very, very rare that it's negative. But that would be good. I think what would we, if we get the quarter point in December, what will that put us at? It'll put us at
right now we're around 6.2.
Yeah.
I mean, but obviously just because the Fed lowers rates does not automatically make the banks.
But there is a lag there.
There is, yeah.
So could be.
Yeah, and you have to look at the have-nots too. If you don't own real estate, what they're kind of dealing with. And obviously one of those things is high rent costs because rents have went up, high grocery costs, and then student loan debt is a really big one. So you have to also look how much college started to go up probably right after me. So like I'm 42. So like the people in their 30s and 20s, their student loan debt is significantly higher than most people in my age group. And that is this dividing line of like who bought a house and who didn't.
I do think the one thing that could keep people back in the non-buying is the rents are not going up next year. They're right now they're flat, negative. We're projecting flat pretty much through next year based on the supply that just hit. It's working its way through the system. It will change, of course, but that could be a big factor.
Right.
Because there are rent deals right now out there.
Yeah. Right. So. And then Josh said that to your point, if rents see more compression, wouldn't that decision for first-time home buyers be pushed further off the road?
It would, because people, to your point, the reason you didn't close those 4 people that you had, those first-time home buyers, was precisely that issue.
Right.
They went from 1,800 to 3,800. And by the way, that's just mortgage. That's not including all the other stuff.
Well, that isn't crazy, though, because like when I bought my condo, I bought it in cash, but let's just pretend that I didn't. The payment on that would have only been like $300 or $400 more than I was paying in rent. And to them, at the time. And now it's over double.
Right.
At least in our every market's a little different, but I mean, it's significantly higher in most markets.
So historically, whenever we bought any kind of real estate from a multifamily standpoint, I always look at the surrounding neighborhood always. So like the property we just bought not recently, I guess, it's been almost a year now, in Henderson, Nevada. It's kind of near the Whole Foods and a lot of bougie areas like the Lifetime Fitness and all that. The homes in the area are $2, $3, $4 million. So the jump from rent to own in that neighborhood, at least, is something that we look at, and it's always been you want as big a gap as possible from the rent to the mortgage. And now,
as a
landlord across the country, that's where we're sitting. And I remember we had a property in Oklahoma City near it was called the something Springs Mall, Quail Springs Mall, I think it was. And the home prices were about the same price as the apartment prices. So the mortgage was very similar to the rent. And so we were losing people, as you would, to home purchases. So when home purchase prices go up, when the interest rate or the price of the homes go up, then, of course, it just keeps more pressure to people on the rental side. That's why I keep bringing up this rental piece. And it's something to watch. And unemployment is just going to keep people more in place.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Today is Cyber Monday. So Jerry's going to put up our Cyber Monday deal for kenmcroy.com. Yeah. Feel free to check it out. And for those asking, Ken got a laser treatment on his face, which is why he is so
Look at
red.
that. Yeah.
People were saying you had a rough night last night.
I have an esthetician wife. That's what happens.
All right. See you guys next week.